My name is Santa Robinson. I'm 31 years old, and this was supposed to be the first Christmas I didn't have to prove myself to anyone. When I stepped through the doorway that winter morning, the air inside the house felt heavier than the cold wind I had just escaped. It was supposed to be Christmas, a day of warmth, laughter, family. But even before I saw anyone, I could feel something was off. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen, mixing with the soft hum of carols playing from a nearby speaker. For a moment, I almost believed everything was normal. I wanted to believe that this year would be different, that maybe the distance between me and my sister would fade away with a simple hug. But that illusion shattered the second her voice cut through the air like a knife. "Why are you even here?" she said, her tone sharp, almost impatient. Her back was to me, hands deep in a sink full of soapy water, but her words landed harder than if she had been looking straight into my eyes. Then, without even pausing, she added, "Didn't you get the hint? This year wasn't about you." I froze. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat locked up. It wasn't anger that silenced me. It was disappointment. It was the quiet ache that comes when you realize someone you love has stopped seeing you the way they once did. For a brief second, I looked at her reflection in the window, her shoulders tense, her jaw set, and I could tell she meant it. She didn't want me there. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and echoing. I could hear the faint clatter of a spoon against the counter, the muffled laughter of kids playing in the living room. Everyone else was here, celebrating. And I was just extra. I could have defended myself. I could have said, "I came to see Mom," or "I brought something for the kids." But what would that change? Words had become useless between us, a currency that lost its value long ago. So instead, I smiled, not because I was okay, but because I didn't want to make it worse. It was a small, tired smile, the kind that hides pain more than it expresses it. Then I turned around and walked out. My boots clicked against the wooden floor, each step heavier than the last. I heard her sigh, maybe in relief, maybe in guilt, but I didn't turn back. I didn't want her to see that my eyes had already begun to sting, melting instantly against the heat of my body. I could still hear the faint sound of laughter from inside the house, the life I used to be a part of. And for a fleeting moment, I wondered if maybe I had been the problem all along. Maybe she was right. Maybe this year really wasn't about me. But deep down, beneath the sting of her words, there was something else, a small spark of understanding. Maybe she wasn't trying to be cruel. Maybe she was just tired too. Maybe, in her own way, she was trying to protect herself from old wounds that never healed. Still, knowing that didn't make it hurt any less. I stopped walking and looked back once, the house barely visible through the snowfall. I smiled again, a real one this time, though no one could see it. I whispered softly into the wind, "Merry Christmas," and kept walking, not because I didn't care, but because sometimes silence says more than words ever can. I sat in my old truck, the engine off, the silence pressing against me like a weight I couldn't shake off. 30 minutes had passed since I walked out of that kitchen, yet her words still echoed in my head like a song I couldn't forget. "Didn't you get the hint this year wasn't about you?" It played on repeat, each time cutting deeper. The windshield had fogged up for my breath, a thin film of mist blurring the warm lights of the house I once called home. I watched those lights flicker faintly, like tiny stars trapped behind glass, close enough to see, but too far to touch. Inside, I could hear faint laughter. My sister's voice mixed with the joyful squeals of her kids, the scraping of chairs, the clinking of dishes. It was a soundtrack I used to belong to. For years, I had been part of that rhythm, setting the table, helping Mom with the food, playing Santa for the little ones. But now, I was sitting outside in the cold, watching life move on without me. The realization hurt more than I expected. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to make sense of everything. How did things get so distant? How did a family so full of love and laughter turn into one where I had to question whether I was welcome? Maybe it wasn't about what was said. Maybe it was about everything that had gone unsaid for years. The silence between us had been growing for a long time, like a wall built brick by brick, each misunderstanding another layer we never tore down. The dashboard clock blinked softly, marking the slow crawl of time. Outside, snow began to fall, gently at first, the flakes swirling under the faint glow of a streetlight. I stared out at the falling snow, feeling that strange ache of loneliness that comes when you're surrounded by things that used to make you happy but no longer do. The house, the lights, the laughter, they were all part of a world that didn't seem to need me anymore. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my messages. The last text from my sister popped up, a simple, almost dismissive note from a week ago. Don't bother bringing gifts this year. Just come if you want to help. I had told myself it didn't mean anything at the time, that maybe she was just tired or busy. But now, reading it again, I could see what she'd really meant. Maybe I should have known better. Maybe I shouldn't have come at all. I put the phone down and leaned back, closing my eyes. The seat creaked beneath me, and the cold air slipped in through a crack in the window, brushing against my face. For a moment, I let my thoughts drift, to the Christmases we used to have, the ones filled with warmth instead of tension. I could see little flashes of memory. My sister as a kid, running around in her red pajamas, Dad laughing as we tried to untangle the Christmas lights, Mom humming softly while decorating the tree. Those memories felt like another lifetime, a place I could visit only in my mind. The radio suddenly flickered to life, static filling the silence before a slow instrumental version of Silent Night began to play. The irony wasn't lost on me. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. Yeah, I murmured to myself. Silent night indeed. My voice sounded strange, hollow in the quiet of the truck. I thought about walking back into the house, about pretending nothing had happened. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe pain, maybe both. I didn't want to force my way into a space that clearly didn't have room for me. I had done that before, showing up, helping, smiling through the discomfort, only to feel invisible in the end. This time, I didn't have the strength. So, I just sat there, watching, listening, breathing, letting the cold seep in, not fighting it. The world outside the truck was alive. Laughter, snow, lights, and yet I had never felt more still, more apart. Maybe that was what growing older did. It didn't just change how people saw you, it changed how you saw yourself. As another burst of laughter came from the house, I looked away. Not because I was angry, but because sometimes looking hurts more than leaving. I turned the key in the ignition, and the truck rumbled softly to life. My reflection in the window looked tired, older than 31. I smiled at that reflection, not out of happiness, but acceptance. Then I whispered, maybe it's okay. Maybe not every story needs to include me. With that, I pulled away from the curb, the tires crunching over the fresh snow. The house grew smaller in my rearview mirror, its warm light fading into the distance. And as I drove into the quiet, the fog on the windshield cleared, just enough for me to see the road ahead. As I drove through the quiet, snow-dusted streets, memories began to drift into my mind like the snowflakes landing softly on my windshield. It was strange how the past had a way of showing up uninvited, especially on nights like this, when your heart is too heavy to fight it off. The further I went from that house, the deeper I fell into the warmth of what used to be. I could still see the flashes of Christmas lights from my childhood, hear the sound of Dad's laughter echoing through our old living room, and smell Mom's fresh-baked cookies cooling on the counter. Everything about those days had felt lighter, simpler, as if love had been something effortless, something we didn't have to earn or question. I remembered being 10, with my sister barely 6, when we stayed up all night waiting for Santa. We couldn't sleep, so we whispered stories under the covers, giggling until Mom came in to scold us. She didn't really mean it, though. Her smile always gave her away. Dad would sneak into our room later, pretending to be Santa himself, his fake ho, ho, ho echoing down the hallway as we squealed and buried our faces in the blankets. Those were the years when everything felt like magic. Christmas wasn't about gifts, it was about being together. It was about the way Dad's voice softened when he said grace at dinner, the way Mom hummed while she served food, the way my sister leaned against me when we watched the fire crackle after dessert. But then came the years that changed everything. Dad's accident wasn't sudden. It was the slow kind of tragedy that gives you false hope before it takes it all away. Hospitals, bills, endless nights spent waiting for updates that never got better. Mom's hair turned gray faster than it should have, and I became the man of the house long before I was ready. My sister was in college by then, and though she tried to help, I was the one who stayed, who handled the paperwork, the debts, the funeral when it all ended. I didn't realize until later that stepping into that role made me a symbol of everything she wanted to forget. In her eyes, I was the constant reminder of pain, the one who kept holding on when she just wanted to move forward. Maybe that's why our relationship had started to crack. After Dad was gone, I tried to fill his place, fixing things around the house, calling every weekend, showing up at every family event even when it was uncomfortable. I thought I was doing the right thing. But maybe to her, it looked like I was clinging to a past she had already let go of. I could see it clearly now. The shift in her tone, the distance in her hugs, the way our conversations became shorter with each passing year. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that sneaks up on you until one day you realize the silence has replaced everything you once talked about. As the truck moved along the winding road, I passed the old park where we used to go sledding. I could still see her, little and fearless, sliding down the hill, her laughter echoing through the snow. I'd chase after her, pretending to be annoyed, but secretly, I loved those moments. I was her protector then, her hero. Somewhere along the way, that changed. She didn't need me to protect her anymore, and I didn't know how to be anything else. It's a strange thing, watching your own memories betray you, watching the same moments that once brought joy now twist into reminders of what you've lost. But as painful as it was, I couldn't bring myself to wish them away. Those memories were proof that there was once love. Real love. The kind that doesn't fade even when people do. The snow thickened, blurring the road ahead, but I didn't care. I slowed the truck and just sat there, letting the memories wash over me like a movie I couldn't stop watching. I thought about the last family photo we took before Dad's accident, all of us smiling, arms around each other, unaware of how fragile everything really was. If I could go back to that moment, I'd tell my younger self to hold on tighter, to say the things that went unsaid. But time doesn't let you rewrite the script. It only lets you watch the same scene until you learn from it. And sitting there in that truck, I finally understood something. My sister's harsh words weren't just cruelty, they were pain speaking in disguise. Maybe she wasn't angry at me for showing up this year. Maybe she was angry that I reminded her of all the years we couldn't go back to. I gripped the steering wheel and exhaled slowly, my breath fogging up the glass again. The lights from the park shimmered through the haze, and for the first time that night, I whispered something I hadn't said in years. I miss you, Dad. And in that moment, it felt like he was still there, somewhere in the falling snow, reminding me that love never really disappears, it just changes form. After the memories settled like dust in my mind, the weight of reality returned, heavier than before. I kept driving, though I didn't know where I was headed. The snow fell thicker now, swirling in the headlights like tiny ghosts. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, not because of the cold, but because of the thoughts clawing their way to the surface. I couldn't run from them anymore. Somewhere deep inside, I knew why my sister had looked at me with such resentment. It wasn't about the holiday, or the gifts, or even the past few years. It was about what I had become, the man who tried to fix everything and, in doing so, broke more than he healed. When Dad died, something inside me shifted. I felt like I had to step into his shoes, like there was no one else who could carry the weight he left behind. I took on the bills, the house repairs, Mom's hospital visits when she fell ill, everything. I told myself it was what he would have wanted. But what I didn't see then was how much it suffocated everyone else, especially my sister. She wanted to grieve, to breathe, to live without being constantly reminded of loss. I wanted to control it, to hold the family together like glue on broken glass. The more I tried, the more it cut me, and them. There were times when she'd call me stubborn. Times when I'd show up unannounced to check on her, and she'd roll her eyes, pretending to be annoyed. But deep down, I could tell she felt cornered, trapped by my constant attempts to help. Maybe she saw it as pity. Maybe she thought I didn't believe she was strong enough to stand on her own. I used to think that love meant doing everything for the people you cared about. Now, sitting alone in that truck, I realized love sometimes means stepping back and letting people figure out their own way, even if they stumble. The years after Dad's death blurred into one long stretch of exhaustion. I was working 2 jobs then, one at a construction site, another at a mechanic's shop, just to keep Mom's medication paid for. I missed birthdays, dinners, little family moments that used to mean everything. My sister told me once, "You're not saving us, Santa. You're just disappearing." I didn't understand what she meant back then. I thought I was being strong. I thought being the provider meant being present. But strength without warmth is just distance disguised as duty. After Mom passed, things between me and my sister became fragile, like a thin sheet of ice. Every conversation felt careful, every word measured. We both avoided the subject of family, as if saying it out loud would remind us of everything we'd lost. When Christmas came each year, I tried to keep the traditions alive, the tree, the old ornaments, the recipes Mom used to make, but it all felt hollow without them. And maybe for her, it was too painful to keep pretending that nothing had changed. That's why this year's argument hurt so much. It wasn't just her saying I wasn't needed, it was her finally saying what had been true for years. I had become the shadow of what our family used to be, and she was tired of living under it. Sitting there in the silence, I couldn't even blame her. All I had ever wanted was to protect her, to keep something of our family alive. But in my effort to hold everything together, I'd forgotten that people aren't things to be fixed. They're meant to grow, to move forward, to let go. I looked at my reflection in the truck's window, barely visible through the frost. The face staring back wasn't the same one from those old family photos. It was harder, more tired, lined with years of trying too much and feeling too little. I thought about how Dad used to say, "Son, you can't carry everyone. Sometimes the best way to lead is to step aside." I used to nod, pretending to understand. Now I finally did. The truth was simple and cruel at the same time. I hadn't failed my family because I didn't try hard enough. I failed because I tried to be everything, the fixer, the provider, the peacekeeper, and forgot that sometimes people just need space to heal in their own way. My sister didn't hate me. She just didn't need me to save her anymore. As the snow thickened, covering the road ahead, I turned off the engine and sat in silence. The only sound was the faint ticking of the cooling motor. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I let the tears come, not for the things I'd lost, but for the things I finally understood. Sometimes, love doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes it means learning when to let go. The road led me to the lake before I even realized where I was going. It had always been our spot, the place where laughter used to echo across the frozen water, where memories lived untouched by time. The same lake where Dad once taught us to skate, where my sister fell, and I helped her up, both of us laughing until our faces hurt. Now it looked different. Quiet. Lonely. The surface was covered in a thin layer of ice, and the wind moved across it like a whisper from another world. I parked the truck by the side of the road, cut the engine, and stepped out. The crunch of snow beneath my boots was the only sound that broke the silence. Each step I took toward the lake felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself didn't want me to come closer. My breath came out in short white clouds, fading into the gray air. I stood at the edge and stared out, the cold biting through my coat. For a moment, I could almost see it again, Dad skating in slow circles, Mom waving from the bench, my sister chasing after me, her scarf trailing behind her. The images flickered in my mind like old film, scratched and fading, but still beautiful. Then the vision melted away, replaced by nothing but emptiness. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. Her gift. I had carried it with me since morning, hoping for a chance to give it to her after dinner, maybe even make her smile like she used to. I had spent weeks finding it. A silver locket, engraved with a simple word on the back. Always. Inside, 2 tiny pictures. One of her at 6 years old, missing her front teeth, and one of us together that Christmas before Dad died. I wanted to remind her that no matter how far apart we drifted, I never stopped being her brother. I never stopped loving her. Now I held that box in my gloved hands, staring at it like it carried the weight of everything unsaid between us. I thought about giving it to her tomorrow, maybe leaving it by the door, but a part of me knew I wouldn't. It didn't feel right anymore. Not after her words. Not after everything that had been buried under years of misunderstanding. Maybe she didn't need the reminder. Maybe this was something I needed to let go of instead. I knelt down and placed the box gently on the snow near the lake's edge. The red ribbon fluttered slightly in the wind, a tiny flash of color against the white emptiness. My throat tightened. Maybe next year, I whispered, my voice barely audible. It wasn't anger I felt. It was surrender. Not the kind that means giving up, but the kind that means accepting what is. Some things can't be forced back to how they were. Some things aren't meant to be fixed, only remembered. The cold began to sting my skin, but I stayed there, staring at that little box like it was the last piece of me I had left to give. I thought about all the times I'd tried. As I turned to leave, I felt lighter, not happy, not healed, but lighter. Like I had finally set down a burden I'd been carrying for too long. The wind followed me back to the truck, brushing against my face like a soft goodbye. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or whether my sister would even notice I'd been gone. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to know. I climbed into the truck, started the engine, and drove away from the lake, leaving behind the gift, the ghosts, and the pain, and taking with me only the quiet peace of acceptance. Just when I thought the night had finally decided to forget about me, my phone buzzed against the dashboard. The sudden vibration startled me, breaking the still silence that had wrapped around the truck like a heavy blanket. I blinked, half expecting it to be a wrong number or another automated message from the cell company. But when I glanced at the screen, I froze. It was her. My sister. Her name lit up on the display, glowing softly in the dim light. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My thumb hovered above the screen, heart thudding in slow, hesitant beats. Part of me didn't want to know what she had to say. Maybe another jab, another reminder that I didn't belong tonight. I had already accepted the silence between us. I didn't need more proof of how far apart we'd drifted. But curiosity, or maybe hope, won in the end. I unlocked the phone. "Hey, where did you go?" The message was short, unsure, almost hesitant, like she'd been sitting with those words for a while before finally hitting send. My chest tightened. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me sit there in stunned quiet, staring at the screen as if it might vanish. I could almost hear her voice saying it, softer this time, not sharp like before. There was something in those 5 words that sounded almost human again. I typed back slowly. Just needed some air. Then I stared at the message for a full minute before pressing send, wondering if it sounded cold or defensive, or maybe just tired, which, to be fair, I was. My thumb barely left the screen before another vibration came through. "Dinner's almost ready," she wrote. "Mom made your favorite." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just those simple words. And yet, they undid me completely. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, sudden, hot, and uninvited. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing, but it was no use. Every wall I had built around myself in the last few hours began to crumble with those 7 words. Mom made your favorite. It was such a small thing to say, but in that moment, it felt enormous. It was her way of saying she still cared. Her way of saying she hadn't forgotten that I was still her brother. Maybe she didn't know how to say sorry. Maybe she didn't even realize how much her words earlier had hurt me. But this was her olive branch, fragile and quiet, extended through a text message. And somehow, it was enough. I looked out the windshield again, toward the direction of the house, though I couldn't see it from where I was parked. I imagined the kitchen, warm lights, the smell of dinner, the clinking of plates, the kids running around while Mom stirred something on the stove. My seat was probably still empty at the table. For the first time all evening, I didn't feel anger or shame or bitterness. I just felt the pull of home. But I didn't start the truck right away. I sat there, letting the moment sink in, realizing how easily love hides itself in the simplest gestures. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's in the way someone still makes your favorite dish, even after harsh words. Sometimes it's in the message that asks where you went, not because they need you, but because they noticed you were gone. As I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, a strange calmness settled over me. I realized then that maybe it didn't matter who was right or wrong. Maybe what mattered was that the door wasn't completely closed. She had reached out, even if only halfway, and that was enough for me to take a step back toward her. Maybe love isn't about who gets the last word. Maybe it's about who takes the first step back. I started the engine. The sound of it breaking the night felt like a heartbeat coming back to life. I pulled onto the road slowly, the headlights carving a path through the falling snow. Every turn brought me closer to that house, to the warmth, the laughter, the noise. But most of all, closer to the quiet truth that family, no matter how messy or fractured, always finds its way back to itself. As I parked near the driveway, I sat for a second, watching the lights flicker through the window. My sister's silhouette moved across the kitchen, setting plates, stirring something on the stove. For a moment, I smiled, a real smile this time, one that didn't hide behind pain. I stepped out into the snow, the cold air biting my face, and walked toward the door. The night was still, but in my heart, something had shifted. It wasn't forgiveness yet, and it wasn't reconciliation either. It was something simpler, a beginning, the soft, trembling kind that grows out of small gestures and quiet hope. And as I reached for the doorknob, I whispered to myself, maybe this year isn't about me. Maybe it's about us. I stood at the doorway for a few seconds, the faint hum of Christmas music drifting through the walls. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air, wrapping around me like a memory I hadn't felt in years. My hand rested on the doorknob, but I didn't turn it right away. I just breathed. Deeply. Slowly. For the first time that night, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost or how I had been treated. I was thinking about what I still had, a family that, despite its cracks, still somehow reached for me in small, imperfect ways. When I finally pushed the door open, warmth rushed over me. My mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred something on the stove. My sister stood by the counter, phone in her hand, clearly pretending not to notice that I had walked in. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to apologize, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Another part of me wanted to ask her why she said what she did earlier. But instead, I said nothing. I just hung my coat, wiped the snow from my shoes, and stepped quietly inside. She looked up, eventually. Our eyes met for half a second. There was a flicker there, something like guilt, or maybe softness. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She didn't say sorry, and I didn't expect her to. Instead, she turned back to the counter and said, "Mom made mashed potatoes. The way you like them." It wasn't an apology, but it was a bridge. And I took it. I walked to the table and sat down, watching as everyone gathered. The kids laughed. Mom smiled as she carried in the turkey, her hands shaking just a little from age. My sister brought in the cranberry sauce, setting it right in front of me without looking up. It was all so ordinary, and yet it felt like something sacred was happening, not in words, but in gestures. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, almost understanding. As dinner began, I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time that day. My niece told a story about her school play. My mother scolded my nephew for feeding the dog under the table. And my sister, she laughed too. A real laugh, the kind that reached her eyes. For a while, I forgot about the sharpness of her earlier words. I forgot about the pain that had driven me out into the cold. All I felt was the warmth of being here, surrounded by the people who, despite everything, were still my home. After dinner, as everyone started clearing up, my sister approached me. She stood beside me for a long moment, her hands fidgeting with the dish towel. Finally, she said quietly, "I shouldn't have said what I said earlier." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. She sighed, shaking her head, then added, "It's just been a rough year. I didn't mean to take it out on you." I smiled faintly and said, "It's okay. I know. And I meant it." I wasn't interested in dissecting the pain anymore. I just wanted peace. For both of us. She nodded, eyes glossy but refusing to cry. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged me. It wasn't long or dramatic, just a simple, quiet embrace. But in that moment, I felt something inside me release, all the resentment, all the distance, all the unsaid words. As I held her, I realized that forgiveness doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it sneaks in through small moments, a message, a shared meal, a simple hug in a kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and forgiveness. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fireplace, watching the flames flicker. I thought about how the day had started, her sharp words, my silence, the ache in my chest as I walked away. And I thought about how it had ended, with laughter, warmth, and quiet understanding. Maybe this year really wasn't about me. Maybe it never was. Maybe it was about learning that love isn't measured in attention or gifts, but in the willingness to stay, to forgive, to try again even when it hurts. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange peace settle over me. The kind of peace that comes not from fixing everything, but from accepting that some things are simply okay as they are. As the fire burned low, I whispered to myself, "Next year I'll bring the locket." And for the first time in a long time I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because, somehow, it was enough. True love and forgiveness are not found in grand gestures but in quiet understanding. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can heal years of silence, reminding us that family isn't about perfection, it's about choosing to come back, again and again.